My name is Renata Cole, and I was 30 for the afternoon. I found $98,000 that nobody had told me existed. It was a Tuesday in March, and I was sitting at my kitchen table with a cup of coffee that had gone cold an hour earlier and a spreadsheet that should have been simple. My mother had been gone for 7 years, and for every one of those 7 years, someone had been collecting rent on a property my mother left me and depositing it into an account I had never once been shown. I want to tell you who that someone was, but first, I need to tell you that when I called her that evening, she answered on the second ring, and her voice was warm and familiar, and she asked how I was doing before I could say a single word. She had been collecting $1,166 every month for 84 months. She answered on the second ring. She asked how I was doing. I said I was fine, and then I told her I had run the audit. Welcome back to Quiet Justice Stories, where the quiet ones finally get heard and the truth always arrives with paperwork. If you have ever discovered that someone you trusted had been helping themselves to something that was never theirs to take, this story is for you. Drop a comment below and subscribe so the next story finds you. My mother's name was Gloria Cole, and she was the kind of woman who kept every document she had ever signed in a fire-resistant box under her bed, with a label on the front that said, "Important," in her careful school teacher handwriting. She was a middle school math teacher for 26 years. She believed in the record. She believed that a thing written down was a thing that existed permanently in a way that spoken words could not be, that paper was the only medium the world could not argue with when the argument got serious. I am a financial auditor. I became one because of her, not because she pushed me toward numbers. She pushed me toward precision, toward the habit of checking the figure twice before you accepted it as true, toward the particular discipline of a woman who knew that most errors in any system are not malicious. They are simply unchecked. Most errors, not all. My mother bought a rental property in 2009 when the market had bottomed out and she had enough saved from 20 years of living carefully to make it work. A small house on Mercer Street, 3 bedrooms, a yard, a rental income that covered her property tax, with a few hundred left each month that she put into a separate savings account she called the rainy day fund. She was not wealthy, she was precise. She died in the spring of 2016 from a stroke that arrived without warning on a Wednesday morning and took her between breakfast and lunch, which is exactly the kind of death she would have found offensive. No time to organize, no time to say the things she had been saving for later, no time to make sure the box under the bed was fully current. I was 27. I drove to her house that Wednesday afternoon, and I sat on her kitchen floor for a long time before I could do anything else. Then I got up and I found the box. The box contained everything. My mother's will, executed correctly, witnessed by 2 people, kept in a plastic sleeve. Her life insurance policy, her bank account information, the deed to her house, the deed to the Mercer Street property, and a handwritten note clipped to the Mercer Street deed that said in her careful handwriting, "Renata, this is yours. I paid it off in 2014. The rent goes into the account at First Regional, routing number below. Manage it the way I taught you." I read that note 4 times. I sat on her kitchen floor and read my mother's handwriting and understood that she had been thinking about exactly this moment, the moment after she was gone, and had tried to make it as clear as possible for me. "This is yours. Manage it the way I taught you." I filed the will with the probate court the following week. The property transferred to me without complication because my mother had been deliberate and the deed was clean and the will was clear and there was nothing to dispute. I was the sole heir. The Mercer Street property was mine. What I did not do in that first year, and I want to be honest about why, was take over the management of it immediately. My mother's younger sister, my Aunt Carla, had been managing the property for her for the last 2 years of her life. My mother had developed some mobility issues, and Carla lived 12 minutes from Mercer Street and had offered to handle the tenant relationship, the maintenance calls, the rent collection. She had done it as a favor. She had done it for love. That was what I told myself in 2016, when I asked Carla if she would continue managing the property while I was grieving and learning to be the person my mother had left behind. Carla said, of course. She said, "Don't think about it for now. You have enough." I said, "Thank you." I thought about it that evening, and then I did not think about it again for a very long time, because grief has a particular power to make the practical things feel impossible, and the reasonable thing felt like trusting the person who was already there. My mother had trusted Carla. I trusted my mother's judgment. I thought about it for one evening, and then I put it in the drawer with the other things I could not handle yet, and I went back to learning how to live without her. That was my mistake, not trusting Carla, trusting without verifying. My mother had taught me that lesson specifically in the context of spreadsheets, and I had applied it to every professional situation of my career, and I had failed completely and entirely to apply it to the person who had held my hand at the funeral. Carla was my mother's only sibling. She was 58 to my 34, retired from a career in office administration, widowed 3 years before my mother died, living in the same neighborhood she had lived in for 30 years, in a house that was comfortable but not paid off. She was competent and organized, and she had always, my entire life, been the aunt who showed up. Birthday cards that arrived exactly on the birthday, not the day after. Casseroles when things were hard, phone calls that happened on the schedule she set and kept without exception. I liked Carla. I want to be clear about that, because the story I'm about to tell you is not the story of a woman who suspected her aunt and was eventually proven right. It is the story of a woman who trusted her aunt completely and discovered 7 years later what that trust had been worth. Those are different stories. The first one has a villain. The second one has a spreadsheet. The audit did not start because I suspected anything. It started because I was refinancing my own mortgage. My lender, a careful woman named Joyce, who had been in residential lending for 20 years, was reviewing my financial profile and asked about the rental property on my asset declaration. I said yes. I have a rental on Mercer Street. Joyce asked for the rental income documentation, 2 years of bank statements showing the rental deposits. I said I would pull them. I went to First Regional's website that evening to access the account my mother had noted in her handwriting, the rental account, routing number below, and I could not log in because I had never set up online access for an account I had never personally managed. I called First Regional the next morning. The representative confirmed the account existed. She confirmed it was in my name. It had transferred to me as part of the estate. She confirmed the current balance. I wrote the balance down on my notepad and looked at it. I said, "Could you repeat that?" She repeated it. The account held $4,200, approximately 3 months of rental income. I asked about the transaction history. She said she could not provide that over the phone for a recently verified account, and that I would need to come into the branch with identification. I went into the branch the following Tuesday, and that was when I sat down with a branch manager named Thomas, and I looked at 7 years of transaction history, and I understood that my mother's careful accounting and my own professional training and the note in my mother's handwriting that said, "Manage it the way I taught you," had all been pointing at something I had chosen not to look at. The account showed 84 monthly deposits of $1,166 each. It also showed 84 monthly withdrawals of exactly $1,166 each. Every month for 7 years, the rent went in. Every month for 7 years, the rent went out. To an external account I did not recognize. Thomas printed the 7 years of statements while I sat in the branch chair and did the arithmetic I am professionally trained to do, and arrived at the number I had been building toward without knowing I was building toward it. $98,000. not approximately, exactly. 84 months multiplied by $1,166, $97,944, which the auditor in me rounded to $98,000 for the purpose of the conversation I was about to have, and which my mother's voice in my head corrected immediately to the precise figure because she had been a math teacher and precision mattered. I thanked Thomas. I took the statements. I drove home. I made coffee. I let it go cold. I opened a spreadsheet. I want to talk about the spreadsheet for a moment because I think it is the center of this story in a way that matters beyond the numbers. My mother taught me to audit before I knew the word for it. She taught me at the kitchen table with the household accounts when I was 11, showing me how to reconcile the checkbook against the bank statement, showing me that every discrepancy has an explanation and that the explanation is either innocent or it is not, but it is always there in the numbers if you look at the right column. She said the numbers do not have feelings, they just have truth. I built the audit at my kitchen table in the same chair I had sat in when she taught me. On one side, I put every deposit, the rental income, confirmed by the bank statements, confirmed by the lease agreements I pulled from the estate file. On the other side, I put every withdrawal, where it went, when it went, the account number it went to. Then I pulled the property records, the maintenance invoices. 0, not low, 0. No documented maintenance expenditure in 7 years on a rental property that had a tenant continuously in residence. The property tax, paid, but from a separate account I found in my mother's files, an account that had been funded by the estate settlement and that I had set on autopay in 2016 and had never examined since. The insurance, same account, same autopay, same 7 years of not looking. The net income from the Mercer Street property over 7 years, after the property tax and insurance which had been paid from my estate account and not from the rental account, was $97,944. It had been withdrawn in full, every month, for 7 years, by my Aunt Carla. I want to tell you what I felt sitting at that kitchen table with my mother's note clipped to the deed beside my laptop. This is yours. Manage it the way I taught you. I felt something that I can only describe as the specific grief of discovering that the person you trusted most in the year after your worst loss had been using that trust as cover. Not anger, not yet. Grief first. Because Carla had been the person who showed up. She had been at the funeral in the front row. She had driven me home from the hospital the day my mother died. She had been the one to call when I did not know how to file the paperwork or where my mother kept the winter coats or whether the tenant on Mercer Street needed to be formally notified. She had shown up and kept showing up, and I had been grateful for every single arrival. And she had been taking $1,166 a month while she did it. For 7 years, she had been taking my mother's last gift to me and depositing it into her own account every month for 7 years and calling me on the schedule she kept and asking how I was doing and never once saying a word about it. I closed the spreadsheet. I opened it again. I closed it again. Then I did what my mother taught me to do when the numbers gave me an answer I did not want to accept. I checked the figure twice. I checked it 3 times. I built a second spreadsheet from a different starting point and arrived at the same number, $97,944. The number was the number. I picked up my phone. She answered on the second ring. If you have ever discovered that someone you loved had been quietly taking something from you for years while you were too grateful for their presence to check, stay with me. Subscribe so this story reaches you all the way to the end, because what Carla said when I told her I had run the audit is the reason this story ends the way it does. I did not tell her what I knew on the phone that Tuesday evening. I want to be honest about that choice because it was a deliberate one and it was the right one, and I have thought about it since. If I had told her on the phone, she would have had the opportunity to construct a response in the specific controlled environment of her own home. with the ability to pause and think and build the explanation before she delivered it. I did not want the explanation built in advance. I wanted to see the explanation arrive in real time, in a room where I could watch her face build it. So I said I had been going through some of the estate files, and there were a few things I wanted to go over with her, and could she come to my place on Saturday morning? She said, of course. She said she would bring coffee cake. She brought coffee cake. The Saturday morning was clear and cold. I had my kitchen table set the same way I set it for client meetings. Documents in order, face down, nothing visible until I chose to show it. My colleague from work, a woman named Sasha, who had been an auditor for 15 years and who had agreed to be present as a professional witness without knowing the specifics, sat to my right with her own notepad. Carla came in with the coffee cake in a carrier bag and her coat, and the particular warmth she brought to every room she entered. She sat down across from me. She looked at Sasha with a question. I introduced Sasha as my colleague and said she was helping me go through some financial records. Carla said, "Oh, of course," and smiled and started unwrapping the coffee cake. I placed the first regional statements on the table, face up, all 7 years. Carla's hand stopped on the coffee cake. She looked at the statements. I gave her time to read. She was a woman who had worked in office administration for 30 years. She could read a bank statement. She understood what she was looking at immediately. When she looked up, her face had done something I had not seen it do in 34 years of knowing her. It had gone completely still. Not the stillness of composure, the stillness of a person who has just understood that the story they were going to tell has been made impossible by the paper in front of them. I said I had pulled 7 years of transaction history from the Mercer Street rental account. I said I could see that the rental income had been collected consistently, $1,166 every month, 84 months, no missed payments, which meant the tenant had been reliable and the property had been managed consistently, and she had done that work, and I was not dismissing it. She started to say something. I said I would like to finish first. She stopped. I said that the rental income had been withdrawn in full every month for 7 years into an external account. I placed the withdrawal records on the table, the account number, her name, her bank. I said the total withdrawn over 7 years was $97,944. I said I had also pulled the property tax records and the insurance records and confirmed that those had been paid from a separate estate account and not from the rental income. I said that meant the rental income, in its entirety, had gone to her account. I said I had the deed, the will, and the estate transfer documents confirming the property had been mine since 2016. I placed each document on the table as I named it. Then I said the only thing I had prepared in advance to say, and I said it in the same voice I use when I am presenting audit findings to a client who does not want to hear them. I said I would like to understand what happened. Here is what Carla said. I want to give it to you accurately because accuracy matters in this story more than anything else. She said the rent was payment. She said she had managed the property for 7 years and she had never been compensated, and she had decided the rent was fair payment for her management services. She said she had assumed I knew. She said she had assumed we had an understanding. I looked at her across the table. My mother's deed was in front of me. This is yours. Manage it the way I taught you. I said we had never discussed compensation. She said it was implied. I said nothing implied in a financial arrangement exists until it is written down. She said I sounded like my mother. I said I took that as a compliment. Then she made the move I had been expecting somewhere in the back of my mind since Tuesday. She leaned forward and her voice shifted into something softer, and she said she had been struggling since her husband died, and she had needed the money and she had not known how to ask, and she had told herself she would pay it back when things were better. She said she was still waiting for things to be better. And here is the moment I want to be most honest about because it is the hardest one. I felt it, the pull, the specific gravitational force of a woman who is genuinely struggling sitting across from me, telling me she had not known how to ask. I felt it and I let myself feel it fully for exactly the time it took me to look at the statement on the table. 84 months, 7 years. She had not known how to ask for 7 years. She had simply taken instead, and the taking had happened in the specific year when I had been too deep in grief to check, and the year after that when I was rebuilding, and the year after that when I had finally stopped crying in the car, and every year after, until it had become so normal and so established that perhaps she had genuinely stopped seeing it as taking at all. I did not say any of that. I said I was sorry she had been struggling. I said I meant that. I said the money was mine and it needed to come back, and I wanted to find a way to make that happen that did not require a courtroom if we could avoid it. Sasha placed a 1-page document on the table, a repayment agreement, structured over 5 years, reasonable monthly payments, no interest, my signature line blank, Carla's signature line waiting. I said if she signed this, we would handle it privately and keep it between us. I said if she did not sign it, I would be filing a civil claim for the full amount plus damages, and the filing would be a matter of public record. I said I did not want to do that. I said I would do it. Carla looked at the agreement. She looked at me. She said I should have asked. I said yes. She said your mother would be so disappointed in me. I said I think my mother would have wanted me to check the account sooner. She picked up the pen. She signed. The repayment began the following month and has continued without interruption. We have not had a family dinner since that Saturday morning. We have not spoken except through the automatic payment confirmation emails that go to both of us each month, which is its own strange form of communication, a number in a subject line, arriving on the 1st, confirming that the arrangement is being honored. I do not know if we will have a family dinner again. I have thought about that more than I expected to. Not with the grief I felt at the kitchen table looking at 7 years of withdrawals, with something quieter and more complicated, the particular sadness of understanding that a relationship you thought was one thing was being maintained on a foundation you did not know was hollow. She showed up. She kept showing up. And every time she showed up, she went home with $1,166. Both of those things are true simultaneously, and I have had to make room for both of them in how I understand who she is and what the last 7 years were. She loved me and she took from me. People contain both. The document does not resolve that contradiction. It just resolves the financial one. I want to tell you what I did with the Mercer Street property. I took over the management myself, which is what my mother's note had asked me to do, and which I should have done in 2016 when I was 27, and too deep in grief to be precise. The tenant, a woman named Mrs. Okonkwo, who had been renting since 2013 and who I called to introduce myself, told me she had wondered for years who the owner was, and had assumed it was Carla. I said it had always been me. She said she was glad to know. She said the property had been well maintained. I said I was glad to hear it. I hired a property management company and a local firm with a clean record and a contract I read in full before I signed. And they handle the day-to-day, and I review the accounts monthly. Every month on the 1st, I check the balance. Every month the balance is what the balance should be. My mother would find that unremarkable. I find it the most satisfying thing I do all month. Martin Cho? I meant to write Martin's name here, but I have already told his story in another place. The name I mean is my colleague Sasha, who sat with me on that Saturday morning and asked for nothing in return, and who has never mentioned it since, which is exactly what I needed and exactly what she gave. The people who show up without needing the credit for showing up are the ones worth building your life around. My mother knew that. She built her whole life on that principle. She wrote it into a note clipped to a deed that she kept in a fire-resistant box under her bed, with a label in her careful handwriting. "This is yours. Manage it the way I taught you." I manage it differently now. I check the figure twice. I check it 3 times. I reconcile the account on the first of every month against the expected income. And I keep the note in my desk drawer where I can see it when I sit down to work, because some things you need to keep close enough to read when the work gets hard and the numbers get complicated, and you need to remember why precision matters. My mother paid off that property in 2014 so that I would have something that was fully mine. She left me a note telling me to manage it the way she taught me. It took me 7 years and 1 spreadsheet to fully understand what she meant. That is my story. 7 years of rent, 84 months of silence, and one Tuesday afternoon at a kitchen table with a spreadsheet and a cold cup of coffee, and my mother's voice in my head saying, "Check the figure twice." If someone in your life is managing something of yours that you have not looked at in a while, look at it, pull the statements, run the reconciliation. Not because the people you trust are untrustworthy, because your mother left you a note that said, "Manage it the way I taught you," and she meant it for exactly this. Check the figure twice. Share this with someone who needs to hear it tonight. Drop a comment and tell me which part of this story stayed with you. Hit subscribe, and I will see you in the next one.